So why does limerence happen? That's what we're exploring in today's video, the root causes of understanding why something like limerence would affect either yourself or someone that you love. But not only that, we're also going to look at possible solutions for it, including medications that do sometimes get prescribed for people that are in limerence. Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I'm glad you're here with me. I have a lot of videos on the subject of limerence, so I'm not going to bore you with the detailed explanation of what it is and how long it lasts and all that. If you are brand new to the topic of limerence, do check out this playlist right up here that kind of walks you through all the different subjects surrounding the concept of limerence. So I'm going to assume for the purposes of this video that you know exactly what limerence is, and most likely it's the woman that you love is experiencing it, but it could be you're looking for this information for yourself also. So let's dive into it. So first, people want to know, is limerence rooted in some sort of childhood trauma? And the short answer is yes. It is basically an attachment wound. I have other videos on attachment styles, and there are three main attachment styles. There's secure, there's avoidant, where you keep everyone at arm's length, and there's anxious, where you tend to pull everybody in close. And secure, of course, is where we want to be. But I do have other videos on attachment styles, so check out this playlist up here if you want to know more about that. But yes, limerence is rooted in a childhood attachment issue, essentially. So that could be perhaps an absent father, the classic daddy issues that a woman might go through, but this definitely can affect men as well. But if the most important man in a young girl's life either is abusive or neglectful or absent altogether, it can create where she wants to seek out that male attention and validation from others because the most important man in her life didn't give it to her. And of course, as we know, that kind of thing could lead to promiscuity later in life, could lead to drug and alcohol abuse later in life, and it could cause her to not know how to form healthy relationships with men, which can lead to cheating. And limerence is indeed often tied to cheating. So yes, limerence does have its roots in childhood attachment issues, essentially. Next, people want to know, is limerence tied to low self-esteem? And the answer is yes, definitely. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the attachment issues, because when a woman or a boy doesn't have a healthy attachment with their mother and their father, it can lead to them feeling like, well, maybe if I was better, they wouldn't have left. Or maybe if I was better, they would be nicer to me. Or maybe if I was better, they wouldn't use drugs and alcohol. Whatever the issue is, it does cause young children to think that the problem is with them. Even just divorce. Kids often blame themselves. I'm the product of all of those things. A father that abandoned me, essentially, a stepfather that was an alcoholic. So all of those things do come into play. All of those things lower our self-esteem, and that does indeed make us more vulnerable to experiencing limerence once we enter the phase where we're in romantic relationships. So what does limerence do to the brain of someone who is experiencing limerence? Essentially, they get overwhelmed, and there is a chemical reaction at play here, and I'm going to cover those chemicals here in just a second. But essentially, the brain gets overwhelmed with a fear of rejection. This is fear-based, make no mistake. They get overwhelmed with a fear of rejection, and this isn't with their primary partner, because again, limerence is often tied to an affair. It doesn't have to be, but it does typically work that way. Someone, will use a wife in this example, someone married to one person, and they develop feelings of limerence for another person, often another guy, and they get overwhelmed with a fear of abandonment of that other guy, not their husband, but of the other guy. They are desperately afraid of that person leaving them or maybe finding somebody else, and then they're left with nothing because their marriage is in shambles and now their affair partner has left them. So they get overwhelmed with that fear of abandonment, and their moods become dictated by the fear of abandonment. When they hear from their affair partner, their mood, of course, gets elevated and spiked, and they're in that euphoric state. And when they don't hear from them, they're devastated, and they're on pins and needles wondering what happened and making up scenarios in their mind about, well, does this mean he doesn't love me anymore? Does this mean he's found somebody else? Does this mean he's never coming back? They get overwhelmed with that sort of paranoia, essentially, and that controls their their every waking moment. That's why all of the other things that used to be high on their priority list, whether that's work, kids, husband, etc., all of that falls by the wayside because their brain literally can't stop thinking about anything else other than their affair partner. Real quick, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit that like button for me. It sends a great signal to YouTube, and I really appreciate you helping me and helping the algorithm to grow my channel so that I can reach more people. Just takes a quick second, so I really appreciate your time to do that. So I mentioned a chemical reaction in the brain that helps to cause limerence. So what are those actual chemicals? And really it releases three main chemicals into the brain when you're experiencing limerence. The first one is norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. And as we know, regular adrenaline kind of gives us that spike in energy and that euphoric state. And essentially, this chemical is a neurotransmitter and a hormone. And this is what controls a body's fight or flight kind of state. And this kind of regulates how we respond in that kind of situation, a critical situation. As a chemical, this is also prescribed sometimes to elevate blood pressure. So for people who have low blood pressure, this can be prescribed to elevate the blood pressure. This helps control your body's response to an emergency type situation. The next one is phenylethylamine, or phenylethylamine, I think is how you say it. I'm not a linguist, I don't know. But this is a chemical that is very similar to amphetamine. What is amphetamine? Well, on the street, it would be called speed. And basically, as the name implies, it kind of like intensifies everything, and it causes your body and your heart rate and everything to speed up with the speed-like frenzy, essentially. And the last one is dopamine, a chemical that we're probably more familiar with than those first two. And dopamine is the chemical that gets released in your brain that essentially makes us feel good, feel euphoric. It also helps nerve cells to send messages to each other. Whatever feelings we're feeling, it helps to kind of disperse that across the entire body, essentially. So it controls pleasure, it controls motivation, feelings of satisfaction, that kind of thing. That's why when the person experiencing limerence is like on pins and needles waiting to hear from their affair partner, and then they finally do, and that dopamine gets released, and they're like, ah. Maybe somebody who takes drugs and, they take the drug and then all of a sudden their stress and their anxiety and things like that go away, and they just feel that peaceful, euphoric feeling now that they've heard from their affair partner. And then lastly, I talked about possible medication. In other words, the person experiencing limerence goes to their doctor and they explain what they're feeling, and then the doctor prescribes a medication just like they would for any other ailment. Now, of course, if your girlfriend or your wife is the person experiencing limerence, you may have a very hard time convincing them to go to the doctor unless their life in every aspect is just falling apart and they recognize that and they want to get help for that, especially in maybe if their affair partner has actually left and clearly isn't coming back, and you as the boyfriend or the husband want to help them and they're willing to go to the doctor. But in many cases, they probably won't be willing to do that, unfortunately. But if they do, the number one drug prescribed by doctors for experiencing limerence is actually a drug called Lexapro. Lexapro is also known by the actual chemical name, escitalopram, and it is prescribed more commonly to treat depression and anxiety, often in teenagers, but it can definitely be prescribed to adults as well. And it basically restores a healthy level of serotonin in the brain. That's really what it does. It's in the same family of drugs like Prozac or maybe Zoloft, other ones like that, but it tends to be milder than those other ones. Tends to just not cause quite the drastic change in behavior and mood that some of those other similar drugs can cause. In addition to depression and anxiety, though, it can also be used to treat OCD. And that does tie in closely with limerence as well, because of the paranoia and the fact that we're tunnel focused on this other person and all of our other priorities are falling by the wayside. That's very similar to OCD, where you're kind of obsessively and compulsively focused on one thing to the detriment of other things. So it has a very close correlation with limerence. And the most common side effects that Lexapro can have basically just cause people to be a little more tired and sleepy than they would be normally. But it can also cause sleep disruptions as well. It makes you tired, but you can't fall asleep, or maybe you fall asleep and you can't stay asleep. It can definitely cause that. But if you or someone that you love is experiencing limerence and your world or their world is completely falling apart, you're in danger of losing your relationship, a little bit of tiredness tiredness or insomnia is probably well worth the chance to actually save your relationship. Anyway, I hope this video helps you, and I will see you in the next one.